world.
I'd like to welcome you all to the Comics Crusade. Provided the show has any success, this will be a weekly show where I discuss 4 or 5 comics from the last week and give quick reviews of the books themselves. Reason that I'm starting this show is because I realized that with my style of comic review and the amount of editing and scripting that tends to go into it, I can't keep up with other comic reviewers. What I'd much rather try to do is just nail everything from that week in the week itself. That way, you, the consumer, are going to be educated on what's worth being on your pull list or not. With that said, this sort of a thing isn't a cheap show to produce, given how pricey comics can be. Not to mention, I'm adding books onto my pull list. Not because I'm really that interested in them per se, but because you're interested in them. Because I've seen people in the comments of videos or in podcasts talk about them. So if you would like your books to continue to be reviewed by me on a weekly basis, please consider becoming a patron so that the show basically won't break the bank, and I can continue to bring both criticism and entertainment your way. Plus, once my Patreon hits $100, I'll be doing a special video where I get on Alex Jones's super male vitality and tell you whether or not it works or if it turns me into a gay frog. Alrighty, let's go ahead and get into this week's books. Man of Steel, number 3. I hate decompressed comics. I despise them. Especially when they're so decompressed, you feel like a writer like David Michelini or Peter David could tell 2 entire story arcs in the same space that it takes someone like Brian Michael Bendis 6 issues to do. That's the problem right now with Man of Steel. When you compare it to the other books that are really solid at DC, like Christopher Priest's Deathstroke or other books I'm going to talk about, this book feels like nothing's really going on. As such, it feels like everything Bendis is setting up is just taking its sweet time for the sake of taking its sweet time or putting in dialogue that is really vapid. I'm dead serious, the dialogue in this book blows. You get 1 sentence of dialogue about a possible threat or mystery, and that's it. The rest of it is fluff. It's like getting a sandwich and it being 90% lettuce and tomato. So, sort of like eating at Jimmy John's. Oh, by the way, Kandor is dead. All dead. Because Bendis. And Superman's family disappeared for some reason. But you don't get to know why. Because Bendis. And the new villain shows up, and we're left with a giant cliffhanger that is making me lose interest, even though you hype him up as the man who apparently destroyed Krypton, when I'm pretty sure Brainiac destroyed Krypton. So we're getting more retcons. Because Bendis. And I've lost all interest. Because Bendis. This comic book sucks. Because Bendis. Thor, number 1. After the large swath of virtue signaling known as Jane Foster Thor that we've had for the last few years, the actual God of Thunder is once again taking up the mantle and kicking ass. I've oftentimes been critical of Jason Aaron's writing because he's easily the most inconsistent writer I've ever seen. He can be mind-numbingly great, or he can come across like he wrote a comic after taking a massive amount of Zoloft. Needless to say, this book is a bit further from the Zoloft side of things. Anyway, since Mjolnir got sent into the sun in an attempt to kill the Mangog for good, Thor finds himself having to use a bunch of different hammers to compensate, and they're made of half-rate Uru. Still, he's on a mission to find all the artifacts of Asgard that dropped off of Asgardia and reclaim them so they don't fall into the wrong hands. This, of course, at the beginning of the comic, has him briefly run afoul of the Juggernaut. But the conflict isn't really a big one. In fact, old Juggy loses the fight off panel. The book establishes that Loki's still a douche, Thor hates him, Jane is still alive, and everyone's basically trying to rebuild after, well, all the crap that happened in the last few years from Jane Foster being Thor. Oh, Namor shows up for a page. Yeah, was kind of hoping to see a fight there, but whatever. But anyway, the missing Loki manages to reveal himself at Thor's new boathouse shindig, and hijinks ensue. They get teleported to Hell, and they find Balder and Scourge. So, get ready for war, I suppose. The book itself isn't bad at all. It's actually pretty enjoyable, but the dialogue could use a little bit of fine-tuning. Still, Jason Aaron seems to be more on point ever since the relaunches in this Fresh Start initiative. His Avengers has actually been really enjoyable as well. This feels basically like a setup issue, and what it's setting up could end up being a lot of fun, given Jason's history with having just fun comics. So, I think in the long run, this book will probably end up being worth it. So if you're looking for a good setup issue with Thor being a grumpy badass, I honestly recommend the book, but I do so with a little hesitation. Venom number 2. Going back to decompressed comics again, I feel like Venom number 2 was over right as it got started. I can sum up this book in 2 sentences. The Venom symbiote repairs Eddie Brock. His magical old black man friend tells him of what's going on behind the scenes. That's it. That's all there really is to the book. The art's great, and I'm glad that Ryan Stegman is taking the time to put a lot of detail and mood into this book. But with that said, we went from issue 1, going at a really solid pace where a lot goes on and a good story is told even though there's a few flaws, to issue 2 basically doing nothing but talk and talk and talk, and some of the dialogue honestly could have been cut for more in the book itself, something a bit more interesting. We didn't really need a rehash of Eddie Brock's background. Yeah, it's kind of cool to see this, hardened S.H.I.E.L.D. agent really see Eddie Brock for the tough son of a bitch that he is, but even so, I could have gone without it. I would have rather had a bit more background on what happened with this guy with the symbiote program, but it doesn't seem like we're going to get that here. We might not even get it at all. Now, the dialogue in the book isn't bad by any stretch of the imagination, though. In fact, it's a lot better than the last issue. The problem that I have is just that it didn't go anywhere. With the next issue, we're going to have Eddie Brock interact with Miles Morales for the first time, and that is interesting. But that's a month from now. I honestly feel like you could just skip this issue and move on to the third one next month, and you might not miss anything. So, I can't say I recommend this book. Not unless you're already a hardcore Venom fan like me. And even then, I'm not quite sure it was worth my money. Red Hood and The Outlaws, number 23. One book that I'm enjoying each issue of, even though I don't talk about it much, is Red Hood and The Outlaws. The Dark Trinity concept has been an interesting one, and I've really enjoyed Red Hood as a character ever since he's been more of an anti-hero. Over the last few episodes, the series has slowed the pace down and focused more on each of the members of the Outlaws. This issue particularly goes in depth with Jason Todd's father, and how Jason's life went prior to him becoming Batman's ward. How his parents met, what kind of a criminal his father was, so on and so forth. Alongside the demons of his mom, and yeah, it's heavy stuff. So, another dialogue-heavy book, yes, but the dialogue is very well written. And the story of Jason's parents is pretty heartrending as well. The artist and colorist have been switched up for this issue, and the grim, grimy look of the art matches the story's tone very well. It's a crazy story because it explains a lot about Jason Todd in general when you think about it, and it lets you into his head along with his dad's head. And quite frankly, I like how it sets him apart, family-wise, from the other Robins. Plus, and I know I'm plussing a lot today, even though this is a bridging issue to one that will probably have more action and suspense, I didn't really come away from this feeling like I was missing something like I did with Venom number 2. So, this is definitely my second recommendation of the week. Wholeheartedly, if you like the Red Hood, if you like the Bat family, definitely pick up Red Hood and the Outlaws number 23. Hunt for Wolverine, Adamantium Agenda number 2. This is gonna be a short review. I hated this book. I hate every single one of these Hunt for Wolverine books. I honestly don't see the point. Unless Logan is somewhere guarding the keys to the universe or he's systematically murdering every bad guy in Marvel, I honestly can't bring myself to care about any of these stories. Mostly because they're going slow as hell. Again, decompressed, and it sucks. This issue is no different. The final page is just showing that this submarine that Luke Cage, Iron Man, Jessica Jones, and Spidey are on also has X-23 on it, or also known as Not Wolverine. That's it. There's nothing worthwhile happening. Oh, somebody has Wolverine's DNA. Why should I be surprised at this? The man was an experiment for most of his life. Ugh. Just, why do I care? Oh, that's right. I don't, because this book sucks. Don't buy it. Mr. Miracle number 9. I'm hard-pressed to think of a writer in comic books right now who's better than Tom King. I honestly can't think of one. Christopher Priest comes pretty close, but Tom King is on top at the moment in regards to quality. Each book that he writes comes across as both incredibly cerebral and incredibly entertaining. You can say that for his Batman book, but you can also say that for his Mr. Miracle. Now, I've been banging on about decompressed comics for this entire episode. This is a decompressed comic in a sense. There's not a lot that goes on here. In fact, the entire issue is about a new treaty being reached between New Genesis and Apocalypse, and you're basically just watching them debate about what's going to happen. Basically, you've got the brothers and Mr. Miracle and Calabac yelling at each other. That's basically it. The entire comic book is dialogue and character building. Here's the thing, though. It's actually pretty awesome. Now, if you're the type of person who needs to have something explode every other issue to keep your attention, look, somebody gets their skull smashed rather violently in this. There you go. Other than that, this issue is really thematically about the mind of Scott Free. About coming back to Apocalypse and having to face every single horror that went through his life all over again. All for the sake of negotiating peace for a world that isn't even his birthplace. The part of the book where Scott and Barda strip in front of the mirror of goodness gave me chills, and no, it's not because of Barda's fat ass. You'll actually see why when you read it. This is the best comic of the month. If you don't buy it, you either just don't like Tom King's style, or you don't have any taste. That's all I can say for you. So, needless to say, if you're not reading Mr. Miracle right now, it's a 12-issue miniseries. Seriously, you need to pick every single book up. It's been a phenomenal run, and this issue is no different. Well, folks, didn't take as long as I thought it would, but guess what? This is the end of the first episode of Comic Crusade. I'm hoping that you enjoyed it. If you did, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Also, do hit the notification bell so that you don't miss any further episodes, because it's going to be back every Friday if this one goes well enough. With all that said, though, my name is Micah Curtis. Welcome to the Crusade. Deus Volt.